Welcome to Hope and Resilience Podcast. I'm John Hitchens, and today we are speaking with a very special guest, mental health educator, Stacey Brake. Stacey, welcome and thank you for coming on.
What a pleasure to be here, John. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We've talked a lot of different times, and one of the things that we talk about many times is anxiety, because it seems like it's just skyrocketing, the individuals that are impacted with that, especially with COVID. So anxiety is a big, broad topic. Do you think you can narrow that or give us some ideas of what you look at when you talk about anxiety and what that means?
Absolutely. So anxiety is a big topic, and it's been on the rise for quite a while. COVID certainly didn't help, but we're seeing more and more anxiety all over the place. And, some of the common signs are things like a racing heart, sweaty palms, worried thoughts. Those kinds of things are what we typically associate with anxiety. Some of the lesser known symptoms are, things like, having, belly issues or, not being able to sleep. Those are some of the less frequently talked about, irritability, those kinds of things. But any of that can point to just signs of anxiety and just feeling generally unsafe or insecure.
Well, there were a lot of things you said there, and I just felt bad because when you said irritability, I'm like, oh, okay, so I must be having anxiety all the time. No, my wife would say that. I say, okay, so we talked. You did kind of said what anxiety was. Can you, when you look at that, then what are because I really believe that even before COVID, that stuff was on the rise. Do you see any reason? Is it just our culture? It's just jam-packed with everybody being so busy, or what do you see some other maybe underlying reasons this stuff is skyrocketing, other than everybody knows COVID really took a scale?
Yeah, such a good question. Well, first of all, I want to say this. Feeling anxious or having anxiety is pretty normal at some point in all of our lives, right? Like it's something that we all face from time to time. So there's a difference between feeling anxious in a certain moment, right? A lot of us would feel anxious if we knew we were going to have to get up on stage and speak in front of our peers, for example. That's different from an anxiety disorder. An anxiety disorder is when, becomes such a big part of your life that it's preventing you from enjoying your life, preventing you from doing the things that you want to do in your life because you're trying to avoid that feeling of anxiety. So it ends up being a fine line between, am I just feeling anxious or do I have an anxiety disorder? I think, to go back to your question, I think it's on the rise for a lot of reasons. One simple reason is that we're just more aware of it, right? So, years ago when I was in school, I remember, going to school and having that nervous belly feeling. And if you had said, do you have anxiety at the time? I would have said, no, I don't even know what that is, right? So part of the reason that it's on the rise in terms of identification is we're more aware of what it is and what it looks like. So that's one reason we see it on the rise. There are really a lot of other causes, trauma, early in childhood can cause us to be anxious and have anxiety disorders later in life. Truly, diet can influence our feelings of anxiety. So there's a lot of new research on gut health. And we know like a disrupted gut can actually lead to feelings of anxiousness and anxiety. And so even without the outside stressors, right? But outside stressors like increased stress can lead to increases in anxiety as well. So there's a lot of factors that are playing into it. And I think we're just seeing all of those coming to a head.
Yeah, I've been amazed how, what Hiswell Holmes is doing. I don't think there's a better time for us to be doing it than now. There were a lot of doors closed. Like you said, we didn't talk about anxiety. When we were younger, it was like, if anybody even said that word, everybody wouldn't, like you said, not know it, but it was also a lot more, hey, just pull up your bootstraps, you can pick yourself up. What are you talking about? Get going. That was kind of how our parents, and during the World War II and all those different eras, that's how they handled that. But now I think, like you said, the data is just pouring out and doors are opening to talk about it. It's okay. So not only is the data out there, but people are reaching and looking for that. So I think it's a perfect time for us to having discussions like this to help people know where that information is and how to use it. So the other thing we talked about was, you said there's causes, trauma. What are some other causes? I know trauma is huge. I mean, I'm reading a lot about trauma out there now. And they're learning that a lot of our issues is based on just that one fact, the trauma. So trauma is one. If you want to go into that more, but also maybe some other causes that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So trauma, I don't know if you've ever heard it talked about in this way, but we say there's big T and little t, right? There are massive traumas that, that we initially think of, like going to war or physical abuse long-term as a child. Those types of things we consider, big T, big traumas. And then there can be little traumas, things that happen that maybe weren't long-term. Prime example, shortly after I got married, I was sitting at a stoplight and the light turned green. There was a truck coming behind me and he didn't see that there was a car stopped. He just saw the green light. And so he just ran into the back of me, a huge truck. And it was one of the most frightening things I've ever experienced. And so the way that little trauma carried over, right? I wasn't injured, nothing terrible happened, like in the grand scheme of things. Like he came, the guy was like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. It was my fault." He told everybody, the police when they came, so it couldn't have gone as nicely, it couldn't have gone nicer as far as an accident to happen, right? Nobody was injured. He admitted the fault. Everything else fell into place. But for the longest time, when I would come up to a red light, I would feel anxiety about stopping at the red light, right? Or I would always be checking the mirrors, checking to make sure no one was behind me. And that's just an example of like a little trauma. Eventually, even without having to go to therapy or get like really intense trauma work and treatment, I worked through it. It was okay. It eventually went away. But for a time period, my anxiety levels were escalated, particularly driving and going to a red light. That's an example of a little t trauma. But either of those can lead to feelings of anxiety and anxiousness. I love to talk about nutrition, just because it's something that I don't think we talk about enough, right? We talk about trauma a lot, but nutrition is such a huge part of our mental health. We think about diet and nutrition as really the main purpose is for us to lose weight or, get into shape or whatever it is. But there's so much more to it than that. And really, having a disrupted gut from processed foods and too much sugars, and there's just a number of things, alcohol can really disrupt our gut health. And once that's disrupted, it basically sends signals of alarm and alert to our brains, which feels like anxiety, causes anxiety. As soon as our brains feel that alarm or that panic feeling, the emotional state, then our brains start to look for the reason, right? We look for the rational reason. Why do we feel anxious? So sometimes it's really difficult to identify that it's coming from our gut because we feel it and then our brains start to look around and go, "Oh, I must be anxious because of this thing or this person or this situation," when it might actually be caused from just a disrupted gut health problem. So there's a number of ways that I think that's what makes anxiety so tricky to treat, right? So for the longest time, we've treated it as a cognitive problem, a brain problem, a thinking problem. We do have worried thoughts when we feel anxious, but that might not be where it came from. The worried thoughts might be an after effect of the other problems that are coming. So a lot of our, old treatments and still new it's still what we do today. We do a lot of cognitive behavior therapy for people who struggle with anxiety, but it doesn't work for everybody. And that's the reason, because it doesn't always come from our thoughts. It comes from other places as well.
Wow, those two areas, because I've heard a lot about trauma, and I hadn't thought about the diet. That's amazing. That's another way that's not even connected to that. And so we're going to bring on eventually a guy called Doc Kruger, who deals with just what you were talking about, the diet and exercise, because it's huge. And so that's going to be a phenomenal piece to bring into the RX for Wholeness program, where it's a wholeness program. It takes in everything. And when I hear what you're talking about, now we go, well, now we know why it's so big, anxiety, because it covers everything and in every aspect. And when you were talking about the little t, I thought that was pretty cool, because I had never thought of big T and little t, but I could see where a little t actually becomes a big T based on that. Can you talk to me about a little bit about some T's, no matter whether they're big or small, I handle okay, and then someone else has the same T standing beside me, and it's a giant T, and for me, maybe it's not even a T.
I love this. I'm not sure that we have a definitive answer, but the best explanation that I've heard of that makes the most sense to me is early attachment. So, thinking about attachment as, attaching to our parents or a caregiver, if you have some disconnect there, it makes it harder later in life to handle the little T's. So if you don't have that secure attachment from a caregiver, a parent figure when you're a child, you don't have that secure blanket, so to speak, to carry you through life. So as you get a little older and you run into, a problem like somebody rear ends you at a traffic light, it becomes overwhelming because you don't have that safety, that emotional safety net kind of current underneath of having secure attachment. So that's my favorite explanation. I'm not sure that we know that as a definitive, this is the reason and this is the only reason, but it's the best that I've heard.
Yeah, well, even like we probably could get into so many subjects here, but when you were talking about fear and rear ended, I tell a story of I had my wife who died. She had we were dating at the time, and we were talking about going somewhere else. Well, we both driven to the restaurant we're at. So I go, hey, just follow me, and then laughingly as we're going out the door, I go, but just don't hit me, okay? So I swear this is true. We go to the first stop sign, okay, and I stop, and she's right behind me, and she hits gravel and slides right into the back of my car. So I'm just like, she hit me. She actually, I told her that was a joke. I just was like,
is she mad about my joke?
Yeah, it's like, well, that's it. I'm not dating her anymore. But it was just amazing that we just jokingly told about it and then it happened. So I could see where, every time I'm behind her now, I'm like, going, is she going to stop? Is she going It could be a T for me. I could see it. That could definitely happen. All right. So we talked about the T's and stuff, but when we were talking earlier, you talked about a study and the impact of this new study coming out and what that can mean to everybody, how to find help. And we can go over even more detail if we have time about other helps, but let's talk about this study we were talking about and get that out to people, because I think it's very impactful and significant in what's available out there to help with this T's, big T's, no T's, all that stuff.
It's so good. So good. So they did a study recently. They took, a big group of people, they all had anxiety. They split them into two groups. One group, they gave them Lexapro, which is a very common prescription medication treatment for anxiety. The other group, they didn't give them any medication. Instead, they assigned them to learn mindfulness meditation. And so they put these two groups, into, the treatment, right? One group is getting the Lexapro and the other group is getting mindfulness meditation as their treatment. And they do that for 40 days. And at the end of the 40 days, they measured again and they found that the treatment was equally effective, whether it was the Lexapro or the mindfulness meditation. which is very profound. There's been people forever who've talked about mindfulness and meditation and like it's calming and it's great for you, but we didn't have like that tangible research to really prove it, right? And so most doctors, going by what has been proven to be effective, are more likely to prescribe Lexapro versus mindfulness meditation for anxiety. The downside of medication sometimes is that there are side effects. Some of them can be really harsh. Some people are just nervous and resistant to take prescription medications. And I personally would feel the same way. I would want to try everything else first, right? If I had that opportunity. But to be able to have it compared side by side and say, no, this actually is equally as effective. And there aren't going to be any side effects. And, once you really learn the basic skills, it's not going to cost you anything. And on the ongoing, so there's so many great benefits in the big picture. And so, it's just really profound. We're really excited about that being something that not only can we all say, we know because we've tried it and we know because we believe that this is helpful. But to say no, and it's been proven, right? We've shown it legitimately in, the research study that's tested, tried and true, right? So that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier. I just started reading a book about how God changes your mind, and he talks about how it has been proven. He's his doctor. I can't remember his name. I got to look that up, put that on the podcast. But he says that any type of contemplating, meditating, mindfulness, impact your mood, all kind of different things of mental health. And to think that I could do that anytime. I can sit down for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and it's impacting me every time I do it to help me have a better brain health. I just go, wow, because there's so many people when I talk to that have to take medication that they do not like it because of all those side effects. And now if we have something that we can offer, which we have, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here in just a minute about the training you have put up on our platform for mindfulness and how that can do that. But just to me, that's amazing. That's a big breakthrough for people that, like you said, not only are worried about it, but would rather not do it. And because a lot of times people, they won't even touch anything to try to help because they're worried about those meds. And the meds can't have, now some of them have amazing impact. I mean, you have to be on the meds to get the chemicals right, but there's another option for people that may not want to do that. So, okay, so I kind of did a lead in there. So let's talk about your course and how do you take this new study that you have and read and what did you do with it and how does that help and impact? What do you have that you're offering?
Absolutely. So before I dive into that, I do want to just be really, really clear. If somebody is taking medication and they're thinking, oh, I'd rather do mindfulness meditation and I want to get rid of the medication, please do not just stop taking medication. That should be monitored by your doctor. It should be done very carefully because the effects, the problem with taking the medication and then just stopping the medication can be a lot worse. So I wouldn't feel good about myself.
No. I'm glad you said that because that's a great point because they may be able to do both, but they may need that med and you don't just jump off. It takes a while and you need to make sure you go through that with your doc and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think the real utopian idea for medication is that, if you're in a place where you're so overwhelmed that you can't function in your life with your anxiety, that the medication can give you enough relief that you can access things like mindfulness meditation and other practices that'll soothe you from the inside out so that eventually you can, go through life without needing it. But you just have to do it the right way. Otherwise it can just be,
definitely professional, talk to them because like you said, and I agree 1,000%. I love what you said is that medicine, a lot of times you're struggling so much that that's the only thing that's going to be able to bring you high enough to where now these other different modalities or whatever you want to call it, as far as different ways they do things, can help. But you got to get that lift up first. And you may not be there. You may be where it can impact immediately, but you got to be careful and talk to professionals about what
Yeah,
you need to do. All right. So now that we
absolutely.
cleared up that, sorry.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So what I created for your platform is the 7-day mindfulness meditation journey. And really the idea is that it's just going to take somebody through that process, for a whole week, and you've got a different practice each day. And what I think is, most people are going to go through that 7-day journey and realize, what, like day 2 was my jam, right? This was the thing that really resonates with me. And it's something that I can do every day because, it connects with me and I love it. Maybe people will go through the 7 days and then they just keep repeating it and do all 7 days every week. I think that's another option, but the goal is just to teach and to guide people through that practice so that not only do they learn, exactly what it's about and why you would do this type of mindfulness meditation practice, but it would also walk you through a journey. So there's like an intro video that says, here's what we're doing for today, and this is what it's about. And then afterwards, there's a guided practice that'll walk them through it with like a guided meditation.
Okay. So it sounds like an extremely great course to start out with and learn the techniques. Are you planning on doing more as far as more meditation things that you add to this? Or is this basically just a basic course to go, hey, here it is. Now you figure out the different ways that you can use this in your life?
Yeah, I think the idea is that this will be a great introductory course, and I would love to do some deeper dives later, possibly host groups where we do meetups and so on. So yeah, we'll see, where it goes from here, but I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to say about this topic that I didn't ask about or that you think would be important to cover? Or even if you have more on, parting words of something you need to cover.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for asking that, because there's definitely one thing that I wanted to say. So I love what you're doing with His Will Homes. I'm so grateful to get to be in your space and in your world and be a part of this. And part of what I love about it is, the old model, especially thinking about anxiety in particular, and this is true for most mental health issues, but you feel anxious. Most of us wait until we're in a crisis, and then we reach out for help, and we have to figure out how to find it. Usually in an anxious state and an overwhelmed state, which feels like one more thing to make it difficult, right? And so what I love about what you're doing is not, hey, it's on the person who's having the struggles to go find the support. I love that you're bringing the support, right? You're taking all those things that, anxiety in particular, the strategies and the tools are not necessarily difficult or complicated to reduce your anxiety, but most of it isn't just shared freely and openly, right? You have to go find a therapist and go, take time off of work and go regularly to get those tools and strategies. Whereas what you're doing is just bringing them to people. And I love that so much. I love that model. And I think, in my view, that's really where mental health needs to go in order to truly serve.
Well, obviously, we love what you said there, Stacey, because you're a big part of this, and we love having you because of your training and your attitude and it's your heart. And so, yeah, that's what we want to do, is to bring it to them so they can have access in one place. And we're bringing a lot of resources there. But I'm going to put you on the spot again, so I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I don't know if you've seen any of our podcasts, but on each podcast so far, and I may have to change this, I may be offending people, but this is a family show, so I'll try not to do that. If you've seen the Top Gun movie, the new one or the old one, or you've heard things about it, one of the big things about any type of fighter pilot flying is that you have to have a call sign to be cool. And I don't want you to be outside that category. So I was hoping you could announce to the world today what Stacey Brake's call sign should be. Now, it's got to be short enough to where, like in a radio call, like the one's an example is like Maverick. Mine was Hitch, pretty easy with the name. But you usually get a name forced on you for all the stupid things you do. But today we're going to let you think about this while I'm talking. But like, you know, Maverick and every different ones, there's all kind of call signs out there. But what do you think resonates with who you are and what you would like to be called as a call sign? Now, I'm not going to place it on you permanently like a stamp, but we may even let you change it the next time we talk to you if you have some time to think about it. But what do you think that call sign should be today?
You know, the first thing that popped in my head, which you know what that means, right? One thing pops in your head, there's no room for anything else, is Mama B. So I'm a mom, I've got 2 little boys, and anyway, that's a big part of my heart.
I love that. Mama B01, Stacey Brake. Thank you for coming on. It was awesome. We're going to do this more. This was too much fun to just do one. So I appreciate you being on, and I just love what you do and how you do it. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm so grateful to be a part of your mission. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. See ya. Bye.